The Immortal Altar Boy by Omar Cuellar. The year was 1980. In the quiet town of Stowe, Vermont, surrounded by vast pine forests and snow-covered hills, life moved at the slow, unhurried pace typical of small villages. Cobblestone streets, blanketed by a thin layer of fresh snow, stretched beneath a heavy, storm-laden sky. At the heart of the town stood the ancient stone church of St. Bartholomew, a gray Gothic structure with towering stained glass windows that glowed faintly in the dim winter light. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of melted wax and aged wood, while the bells rang out with a solemn echo that reverberated off the cold stone walls. Freddie, a 14-year-old altar boy, pushed open the heavy oak doors of the church, adjusting his white surplice over the black cassock that reached his ankles. He was a slight boy with deep blue eyes and tousled chestnut hair that fell across his forehead. His faith was unshakable. His days revolved around prayers, Bible study, and masses. He had practically grown up within the walls of St. Bartholomew, and his religious devotion was as pure as it was innocent. Father Gregory used to say that Freddie had the soul of a martyr, an absolute dedication that, while admirable, kept him isolated from other boys his age. That night, however, something in the air felt different. The storm brewing beyond the stained glass was growing fiercer. Lightning zigzagged through the black clouds, and thunder rolled like ancient warnings. Freddie was alone in the main nave, sitting in one of the intricately carved wooden pews with the gospel open on his lap. The candlelight flickered uneasily as he read, his lips moving silently in rhythm with the sacred words. Outside the storm roared, but in his mind only the verses echoed. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the stained glass windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the stone columns. That was when a sharp chill raced down his spine. He tried to focus, but the words on the page began to warp. The letters stretched and twisted as if they had a will of their own. An invisible pressure squeezed his chest. The book slipped from his hands. A violent dizziness struck him. His fingers trembled, and before he could react, a black veil fell over his vision. His body collapsed onto the pew, rigid and cold. Silence swallowed everything. When Freddie opened his eyes again, the church was still there, but something had profoundly changed. The shadows seemed thicker, and though the air was still, it vibrated with a distant hum. He sat up slowly, his mind clouded by thick fog. He rubbed his temples, trying to remember what had happened, but the memories slipped away like smoke through his fingers. Looking around, he noticed something strange. The books on the shelves, ones he had always ignored, now seemed to call to him with an inexplicable pull. Without knowing why, he stood and walked to the church's small library. His fingers brushed across the dusty spines of ancient volumes, treatises on alchemy, scientific encyclopedias, hermetic philosophy texts, and manuals of astronomy. Something inside him hungered to absorb that knowledge. He pulled out a thick compendium on constellations and their influence on ancient cultures and began reading with feverish intensity. In the days that followed, his behavior changed completely. He no longer spent hours studying the gospel or assisting at religious services. Instead, he plunged into forbidden sciences, astronomy, alchemy, and philosophy, devouring knowledge with an insatiable appetite. The priests and parishioners grew concerned. Father Gregory tried to confront him, insisting he return to the straight path and focus on Christian teachings. But Freddie refused, arguing that truth was not confined to Scripture alone. What no one suspected was that Freddy was no longer entirely himself. During his blackout, his consciousness had been replaced by that of a member of the great race of Yith, an extremely ancient civilization that had perished millions of years earlier. The Yith had mastered the art of projecting their minds into the bodies of other species on distant planets in order to study their cultures and gather their knowledge. Now, one of them inhabited the body of the young altar boy, while the Yith explored the human mind and collected information about earthly civilization. The true consciousness of Freddy was trapped in Panacadus, the vast and colossal city of the Yith. Built from materials that defied known physical laws, the city stretched in endless avenues of impossible angles and cyclopean towers that scraped the starry skies of an alien world. Its libraries, infinite in size and content, held the accumulated knowledge of millennia. There, Freddy wandered in astonishment among gigantic translucent creatures with segmented limbs. Though the Yith felt no human emotions, they displayed a certain curiosity toward the human mind now roaming their city. They granted him unlimited access to their archives in exchange for him sharing his experience as an altar boy on Earth. But Freddy refused. He would not allow his faith to be dissected as a mere anthropological curiosity. During his wanderings through the libraries, he discovered an ancient, dust-covered volume, the Pnakotic manuscripts. This text, considered sacred among the Yith, contained arcane and forbidden knowledge. As he leafed through it, he found a cryptic verse that, according to the ancients, had the power to grant any wish if recited at the proper moment. The promise of that possibility ignited a desperate hope in Freddy to return home and, with the cryptic verse, wish for and achieve immortality. His greatest dream was to become the first immortal human being. Without hesitation, he tore out the page containing the verse and hid it in his clothing. He knew he must wait for the moment when his consciousness would be returned to his body on Earth. Finally, the day arrived. He felt an overwhelming pull, as though his mind were being sucked into a vortex. In the blink of an eye, he was back inside the church of St. Bartholomew. The storm still raged outside, the candles flickered violently, and his body lay on the pew exactly as he had left it. With his heart pounding wildly, he pulled out the stolen page and held it before his eyes. Thunder crashed as he began to recite, "Sleep, Watcher, till the spheres turn 26,000 years, and I return to the place where now I burn. Then other stars shall rise upon the axis of the heavens, stars that soothe, stars that bless. Only when my orbit is complete shall the past disturb your door." The moment the words left his lips, the entire church trembled. An icy wind swept through the nave, the candles snuffed out, and a dense darkness swallowed everything. Freddy felt his body breaking from within, as though his very essence were being rewritten. And then, silence. An absolute, unnatural silence that enveloped him completely. When he opened his eyes, he knew something irreversible had taken place. His body was still there, but he felt an ancient weight pressing down on his shoulders. He was immortal now, but not as he had dreamed. His wish had been granted in the cruelest possible way. He had become the very embodiment of death itself. From that instant onward, Freddy was condemned to witness every death that occurred on Earth. Days, months, and years blurred into an endless succession of endings. He saw wars, natural disasters, murders, and quiet deaths in forgotten rooms. Whenever a living being drew its final breath, Freddy was there, watching, powerless to intervene. Over time, his face became covered in bloodstains, indelible marks of every tragic and violent death he had witnessed. The blood had seeped into his skin. Eternity revealed itself as a prison. Freddy understood that he would never know rest or oblivion. He was an eternal witness to the fragility of life. Sometimes, in the absolute silence that followed a violent death, he wondered whether the Yith had foreseen this fate for him, whether his encounter with the Pnakotic manuscripts had been orchestrated from the very beginning. But those questions no longer mattered. Freddy was now death, and his sentence had no end. He wanders the world, invisible to most, though some, in their final moments, claim to see a boy with sad eyes and a face stained red, watching them from the shadows. Because death never forgets, and Freddy can never leave.